Welcome back to the Bland Panel, everybody. My name is Jay, and today I want to talk about collecting comic books. Shocker for the channel, of course, but I work at a comic book store, and a lot of the time when we get new people coming in, one of their questions, aside from, where do I start with this character? Do you have anything written by whoever? One of their biggest questions is going to be, how do I start collecting? What do I do? Like, what route do I take? And that always is sticky in my head because there's no set way to collect comics. There's a number of ways, as they are put out in various formats and different shapes and sizes, and that's part of the beauty of comic books. I always tell people that when you're getting into comic books, if it looks cool to you, that's all that matters, because who knows, you could just find a cover plenty attractive to look at, and then once you open it up, you might be reading the best story of your life. You never know. You probably wouldn't have bought it if it didn't look dope as hell right there, right in front of you in the first place. So today I wanted to talk about the various ways in which you can collect comic books and all of their various formats, or at least the ones that I have available to talk about, what the pros of each one are, what the cons are, the price points, what gets collected, what doesn't. All of that is going to be talked about in this video. Now, before we continue, I do want to pass off a question to you. How do you prefer to collect comic books? Do you trade weight? Do you get single issues? Do you prefer to buy omnibuses? Whatever it is, let me know down in the comments below. I can't wait to read that as always. And of course, while you're there, be sure to like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell icon so you don't have to miss out on any of the videos that we have coming out going forward. All right, on with the show. So the first format that I want to talk about, of course, is single issues. Single issues, the most common way to buy your comics. If you don't have a local comic book store near you, there are ways to get single issues if this is how you want to read. Down in the description below, you will find links to how to find a local comic book store near you, as well as some of the resources in which I have used in the past in order to order comic books and deliver them straight to my house. Now, one of the perks when it comes to buying single issue comics is that it is a lower cost up front. A comic book retails from anywhere between $2.99 to $5.99 typically. The standard comic book will be $4 or $5. If you are buying a plethora of issues and you are subscribed to a lot of them at your local comic book store, the drawback there is that you are spending more money more frequently. Now, if that is a concern to you, there are other formats, but one of the pros about reading single issues is that you are constantly as up to date as possible when it comes to what is happening right now. A lot of times when it comes to collecting, especially within comics, is FOMO. The fear of missing out is rampant in comic books, and people are always trying to vie for, the first print of something, or the first appearance of somebody, if it's new, or really just the latest issue of whatever character or story they want to be reading. The fact of like, oh my god, a book that I waited a month for is sold out, what am I going to do? Sometimes you got to wait a couple weeks in order to get a second print, but sometimes if the book sells well, you get a second print. Or if a comic shop is good for you, they will special order that book for you, especially if you have a pull box. The other thing is covers. They are incredibly collectible. For me, I don't normally go too hard on collecting variant covers, but I do have some here. This is X-Men issue number 10. I love this comic book. It is incredible. You have your standard issue cover that you can kind of get anywhere, wherever. It's the stock cover, the main cover for the book. You have stuff like this. Now, this is the John Tyler Christopher, the JTC variant of, I believe it was X-Men issue number 1, but I love his art and I love negative space covers. This is using the negative space of the blank slate behind her in order to kind of show off everything else, and I love that. There are plenty of those out there. David Nakayama has done a bunch of these. I'll flash those up on the screen so that you can see, but I love that kind of variant cover. It's fire and it looks so cool, and it retails for the same price as your standard issue cover, if not a little bit more. Overall though, the lifeblood of comic books is largely in single issues. If you really want to show up and say, hey, I want to contribute to comic books and I want to contribute with my dollar, vote with my dollar as to whether a book succeeds or not, it lives and dies by the single issue. So if you really like seeing, for instance, Aquaman having a book and you don't want that to flounder, I really didn't mean to use that pun, oh my god, but if you don't want the book to fail, you want to show up, you gotta show up with your dollar. That means buying and pre-ordering those single issues wherever you can. We do it at I Like Comics here in Vancouver, Washington, the best comic book shop in the United States as far as I'm concerned. Now that does bring me to my next point, which is of course the trade paperback. Also known just as a standard graphic novel, the trade paperback is basically just a collected story arc. usually containing anywhere from 3 to 6 issues. It collects a full story, so that way you don't have to wait a month in between reading each individual chapter, which is lovely. And it's got more content for you. It gives you all of the story at once, so those minor cliffhangers don't really leave you hanging. But the downside is that you are having to wait longer for the paperback to come out. A story arc has to finish out, which means that's effectively 5 or 6 months on average for your standard comic book, which means that usually a month later, at minimum, you are getting your trade paperback in your store. You sometimes have to wait upwards of 3 months in order to get that trade paperback. Sometimes they just go straight to hardcover. DC has done this a whole lot, where they will put out like a standard size hardcover. The price is a little bit higher because it is a hardcover, largely with a dust jacket and the whole nine, but it's effectively the same thing. It collects the exact same amount of material, the same material, and then it will just come out in a softcover format, either at the same time or at a later date, because at least for DC, their hardcovers tend to do better than their trade paperbacks, but they typically do cost on average of like $5 to $7 more. So if you don't mind waiting a whole lot for your comics, then this is definitely the way to go. It costs a little bit more upfront, as a trade paperback is anywhere from $15 to $20. A hardcover usually has a baseline of like $20 or $25. So you're paying more upfront, but less overall, because rather than paying $4 to $5 per issue, you are essentially paying a reduced price for the entire story. It's pretty nice. It's definitely a completely viable way and a very popular way to read and collect your comics. I should also note that DC and Marvel specifically, I know Image has been doing the same thing, but they have been putting out these smaller, more compact version of their famous stories. So rather than hunt down old printings that are impossible to find of these classic stories from both Marvel and DC, you can get your hands on these. Starting with DC, these are their compact comics. Now, what this will do is this will run you only $9.99. It's only $10. But the great thing about this is that it collects an entire story, not just the first 5 issues of a story and then there's a cliffhanger until the whole thing is over. No, this collects, for instance, we have All-Star Superman. This is written by Grant Morrison with art by Frank Quitely. This is a phenomenal story, one of the most seminal Superman stories out there. You can get a full-on trade paperback or a full deluxe hardcover, or you can pay $10, get the whole thing in a smaller trade paperback. Let me juxtapose this up against something else. You put it up against a regular size trade paperback, you can see how big of a difference this makes. Some people have been hesitant to buy these. As you can see here, the spines don't exactly line up right. But if you're just on the go and you are traveling, or maybe you just need something to put in your backpack or even like a jacket pocket of some sort, then this format is the format for you. Now, this is just DC's version, and Marvel's version actually debuts this coming week, but I have the first one. And that first one is Daredevil Born Again, written by Frank Miller with art by David Mazzucchelli. This is essentially the same thing as the DC Compact Comics, but this is called Marvel Premier Collection. It retails for $15, but it does collect an entire story. Again, the trade paperback version of this costs roughly anywhere from $16 to $18, $20, or you can get like a bigger hardcover version of it, but this costs less than that, and you get the whole thing plus a new foreword written by Charlie Cox, and you also get script and additional back matter with art process from David Mazzucchelli and Frank Miller in the back of the book, which is just so awesome to look at. I mean, like, that is dope. Like, just overall, this is absolutely fantastic. And another great way to collect seminal stories without having to go and pay a ton of money if you don't want to get the single issues or get the other older formats that are probably out of print. That is the second most popular way to collect your comics. Now, if you are wanting something a little bit nicer, maybe a higher price point, then you can go for a deluxe edition. Now, you can just get like a standard size hardcover like I told you before. It does feel a little bit nicer, but a deluxe edition hardcover is usually something that provides all of that extra material that you just saw within that Daredevil book, but in a very big deluxe size where you can really pour over the artwork, especially something like this. This is Murder Falcon, written and drawn by Daniel Warren Johnson with colors by Mike Spicer. I actually got this copy signed. I really love this. Daniel Warren Johnson did an awesome remark of the Murder Falcon in this. But a deluxe edition hardcover will collect the full story, as I've mentioned before. It will cost a little bit more. Rather than paying $24.99, this did cost $30 for a deluxe hardcover edition. But in the back matter, it collects all of these really cool homage covers that were drawn up for the series, as well as some really cool sketch process stuff in terms of design and just kind of being a sketch diary. Deluxe edition hardcovers, of course, do come in all shapes and sizes, and you are paying more up front, but in terms of long term, you are again paying a little bit less than you would given how much content there is in there rather than just getting the single issues. It looks nicer on the shelf, therefore you are kind of paying for what you're getting, which is of course a very high quality product. Now the next step up from that, in case maybe that's not your vibe, but if you want to collect a full run, like if you want to collect issues 1 through 25 or like 30 issues of a run and be like, no, I am done trying to just get trade paperback after trade paperback or single issue after single issue, you can get what's called a compendium. I am a sucker for compendiums because as much as I love an omnibus, which we will talk about here in a minute, a compendium just gives you so much material up front for less cost than that of its hardcover companion. Like for instance, this is the Kyle Rayner Green Lantern compendium. It retails for $60, but it gives you all of this material. It collects all of this right down here, which is well over 20 or 25 issues of material. If I were to track all of these issues down, especially some of these key books that are in there in terms of first appearances or death ofs and things like that, that's going to cost me well over the price point of just getting this paperback. And I think that is super, super worth it, especially if when I would get those single issues, I'm going to want to put those on a wall or slab them or drop them in top loaders and put them somewhere else. Like, I'm going to want to open those up and read them. Comics are 100% made to be read. However, they are still art, so your mileage may vary, but I will say that a compendium is a lot of bang for your buck, and they do come in all shapes and sizes. This one is a rather small compendium overall. I don't know the exact page count, but I think this has upwards of like 500 plus pages. Probably doing some light work estimating on that. Or you can get something that's more than 1,000 pages, and you got the JSA Jeff Johns and David S. Goyer compendium. This thing is a beast. I mean, look at how big that is. This thing is positively massive. It contains at minimum, like 45 issues of material. And that's, again, probably being rather conservative with how much is actually collected in this thing. But once again, $60 for all of this. This is fire. I love getting compendiums. Now, compendiums do like to go out of print a little bit earlier than the likes of a trade paperback or even a deluxe hardcover edition. And again, you are paying more up front, but less overall in terms of finding and hunting down all of the single issues. It's also going to weigh a lot less than buying all those single issues because you got to put all of those in a box, and then what are you going to do? And then we have the big daddy of them all, and that is the hardcover omnibus. These things are absolutely gargantuan. Like, this might as well be a weapon. I mean, this thing is huge. This is the first volume of the Jeff Johns Green Lantern series, and man, I'm telling you, this is already a weight on my shoulders and on my wrist. Like, this thing is heavy. When it comes to an omnibus versus a compendium will cost you less, but it's a paperback, and sometimes people really just prefer a hardcover format. But there's a huge community surrounding collecting omnibuses. Over on TikTok, my buddy, the Omnibus God, he's got them all. Like, he's got them all over the place. And I know for a fact that this is his primary way of collecting and reading comics, and I love that. This is a little bit out of my price range in order to buy consistently, but the thing is that if you are willing to wait for an entire run to finish before buying the omnibus, not only are you paying significantly less for the entire run, but you have the patience to wait for the omnibus to come out. Therefore, I think you might also have the patience for the omnibus to be able to cost less for you. There are plenty of shops out there that will sell omnibuses for less than their cover price. After a while, they might have sales and whatnot. Sometimes they end up in bargain bins and things like that, especially if it's a book that, a shop just has had a lot of trouble getting rid of. Now, my shop, we do 20% off on all of our graphic novels. That includes omnibuses. So if you did want to take 20% off of 125, bam, there's a great deal for you right there. However, there are sites out there like Organic Priced Books, and In Stock Trades is another one where you can get these bigger collected editions, even trade paperbacks, for up to 50% off or as low as 35% off or so. So there are ways for you to save money while getting bigger collected editions that are both nice and they have tons of material to them, so you won't run out of reading material anytime soon with effectively zero cliffhangers, unless you're dealing with something like Jeff Johns' Green Lantern here, where there are 3 of these big bad boys, and they are absolutely massive. But they do collect a ton of the story, so you aren't really left waiting for too much at the end of the day. Either way, those are all of my thoughts on collecting comics. Now, of course, you can collect graded comics, and you can do a lot of the cover series, like I have a lot of Alex Ross's covers right behind me. I did touch on a little bit of that earlier, but either way, if you're looking to just get into collecting comics in general, of course, there are several ways to read, several ways to collect. I highlighted as much as I can today. Of course, there are other things a lot like DC's Absolute editions, not to be confused with their Absolute Comics, but their Absolute editions are giant hardcovers, usually retailing from anywhere between $75 to upwards of $125, but they come in a really big deluxe edition, and it's got a slipcase, it's got a ton of material, the production quality is magnificent, and that also has its own collector's market as well. Something I should also mention is reading digitally is not bad. There is Comixology, there's Global Comics. Those are 2 of the most popular ways to read comics. They will have day and date comic books come out on the day of release largely. And then of course there is Marvel Unlimited and DC Infinite, where you can pay either monthly or for a year, and you get access to a ton of their back catalog of comic books that you can just read at any point. But the drawback for those is that you have to wait anywhere from a month to 3 or even 6 months for the newest issue. So, it has its ups and downs. Everything has its ups and downs when it comes to comic books. It's just a matter of how you prefer the space that you have, how you like to read and engage with material, all of that kind of stuff. But once again, I'm going to pass it back off to you. How do you prefer to collect your comics? Let me know down in the comments below. I can't wait to read and hear about it as always. That being said, my name is Jay, this is The Bland Panel, and I will see you next time.